and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I am Ladi Akiridulwale. The headlines. Moscow-backed officials claim 7 people are killed and dozens injured after a Ukrainian air raid on the city of Novaya Kakhovka. White House says Iran is preparing to supply Russia with weapons capable of drones. And Ukraine's Ministry of Internal Affairs says death toll from a Russian rocket attack in Chasiv Yar has risen to 33. We begin the program today with news on an attack by Ukrainian armed forces in the Russian-held town of Novaya Kakhovka, which has killed at least 7 people, and that's according to Moscow's state news agency TASS. Russian-backed regional administration leader Vladimir Leontiev said, quote, there are 6 people confirmed dead and many dozens injured with shrapnel wounds and cuts. TASS reported that the Ukrainian army attacked Novaya Kakhovka, which damaged buildings and led to explosions at several fertilizer warehouses. Ukrainian officials said their forces had destroyed an ammunition depot there. Alexei Arestovich, an advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, tweeted a video of what he said was one of the explosions. He said Ukraine's armed forces were working on the enemy in Novaya Kakhovka, adding that the extremity of the blast in the video came from fuel trucks being placed around an ammunition depot before the attack. And U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the United States believes Iran is preparing to provide Russia with up to several hundred drones, including some that are weapons capable. During a briefing at the White House, Mr. Sullivan said unmanned aerial vehicles could be delivered on an expedited timeline, which includes training sessions to use such vehicles as soon as early July. But Mr. Sullivan also said that the Ukrainian defense of the country's major city adds to the U.S. perspective that Russia has failed to achieve its strategic objectives in Ukraine.
Information indicates that the Iranian government is preparing to provide Russia with up to several hundred UAVs, including weapons-capable UAVs, on an expedited timeline. Our information further indicates that Iran is preparing to train Russian forces to use these UAVs, with initial training sessions slated to begin as soon as early July. Russia has already substantially failed to achieve its strategic objectives in Ukraine. Its strategic objective was to take Kyiv, the capital, to end Ukraine as a country, to eliminate Ukrainian identity from the map, and to subsume Ukraine to within Russia. They have failed at that. Kyiv stands, Kharkiv stands, Odessa stands. The major cities of Ukraine across much of the country are in Ukrainian hands and are being ably and bravely defended by the Ukrainian military with the support of the United States and other NATO allies, as well as countries around the world. Now, it is certainly the case that Russia has been able to grind out kilometer by kilometer, inch by inch, some territory in the east, and the Ukrainians have made Russia pay a dear price for that, and the sanctions have made Russia pay a dear price for that. And we will continue to work with the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian government on a strategy that ultimately achieves their objectives, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table. And as President Biden said when we were at the NATO summit just 10 days ago, we will do that for as long as it takes. But our fundamental goal with respect to approaching Russia's sale of oil onto the global market is twofold. 1, reduce Putin's revenues, and 2, do so while imposing the minimum amount of harm on consumers on the pump. That's our goal. That's what we're going to keep trying to do.
And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that 31 people had been killed and 9 saved from the rubble in Chasiv Yar after strikes hit a residential block over the weekend. Speaking during his nightly video address, Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine's second-largest city, Kharkiv, had also come under attack by Russian artillery. However, we are learning that the death toll has now risen to 34, according to Ukraine's State Emergency Service. Kharkiv, in the northeast, close to the Russian border, but outside the Donbass, suffered heavy bombardment in the first few months of the war, followed by a period of relative calm that has now been shattered by renewed shelling in recent weeks. Mr. Zelensky also said Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs had summoned Canada's representative to protest against the handing over of a turbine to Russia's state-controlled Gazprom for natural gas supplies to Germany.
Debris clearance continues all day in the city of Chasiv in the Donetsk region. The day before yesterday, Russian terrorists attacked 2 apartment buildings. At the moment, 31 people are known to have been killed. 9 were saved. Kharkiv faced new brutal attacks by the Russian army. Another missile hit a residential building. 1 block was completely destroyed. In the morning, the occupiers shelled the South and Kiev districts with rocket artillery. 5 people were killed. Today, I submitted to the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine a very important draft law on legal and social guarantees for Polish citizens residing in Ukraine. In fact, this is a response to the law that was adopted by the Polish state in the spring in the interest of our citizens. In particular, I propose to give our Polish brothers the opportunity to legally stay in Ukraine for 18 months. The rights to employment, economic activity, study at our universities, medical care. First, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had to summon Canada's representative to our country due to an absolutely unacceptable exception to the sanctions regime against Russia. It is not just about some turbine Nord Stream that Canada should not have, but still decided to hand over to Russia. In fact, it is about common rules. If a terrorist state can squeeze out such an exception to sanctions, what exceptions will it want tomorrow or the day after? This question is very dangerous. Moreover, it is dangerous not only for Ukraine, but also for all democratic world countries. The decision on the exceptions to sanctions will be perceived in Moscow only as a manifestation of weakness. It is their logic, and right now there should be no doubt that Russia will try not only to limit as much as possible, but completely stop the gas supply to Europe at the most urgent moment. This is what we need to prepare for now. This is what is being provoked now.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Let's talk now to Ambassador Harun Umar, a retired diplomat who's joining us from our Abuja studios. Good morning to you, Your Excellency. Thank you for your time.
Good morning. You're most welcome.
Let's. Do you get the sense? That it seems as if the world is accepting that there's conflict in Ukraine and they're moving off? Life is going on, because it appears as if we've come to accept it. If you take a look at the general world situation, other things have happened that seem to have taken the headlines away from the war in Ukraine.
Yes, of course, you can't continue to have issues on a prolonged period. Life has to move on. You see, the problem is it's coming up as exclusively between Russia and the West. Some of us in Africa and other places will have to find a way. Of course, we are affected, particularly some other countries. In Nigeria, we are lucky. Some of the side effects of the war is minimal, I will say. But you see, other countries are suffering from food shortage, for instance, and of course the effect of movement of goods as a result of the war, as a result of the sanctions. But you see, some other countries in Europe, they will never get away from it. It is right in their face, and they cannot really remove it, no matter what other situation, because it is affecting their daily lives, their day-to-day activities. They are suffering from energy crisis. They are suffering from inflation, food crisis. So this will not take away, nothing will take away from their, take it away from them. But Asian countries, for instance, they have a way of, they have to move on. And we in Africa, by and large, we are not quite affected, except perhaps in the area of food, particularly wheat, where most people import their wheat from Russia or from Ukraine. But otherwise, after getting to 4 months of this crisis, people will not allow it to overshadow their day-to-day activities, you see. And diplomatically, I can see that an alignment and realignment is going on. And that is going to shape the future of the international relations. And let us
talk about that international order, because that was going to be my next question. It does appear that for all practical purposes, that the diplomatic side, that is the attempt to bring about some kind of peace or truce while negotiations about what will subsequently happen take place, are for all practical purposes dead. Nobody is talking about that anymore. The closest we've come to it is the negotiations, possible negotiations over allowing Ukrainian grain to go through out of the Black Sea, which is blockaded by Russian forces. But outside that, nobody's talking about peace anymore. What does this portend for diplomacy, especially in view of what you talked about in terms of a new world order? Russia and China, possibly now Iran on one side, and then on the other, the Western allies, the UK, the US, Germany, and so on the other.
You see, after a prolonged analysis by myself of this situation, I realized that initially, the initial intention of this war was orchestrated by the desire of the West, and particularly the US, to provoke a unipolar superpower on the globe. Because their action by attempting to surround Russia is to muzzle Russia to the effect of submission, such that Russia will not constitute any force, any threat to the West or to the Western interests. And that is why they are admitting more and more countries surrounding Russia. And once, if they had succeeded, they would have installed their weapons of mass destruction that will threaten, that will instill fear in Russia. And Vladimir Putin is an intelligent person. He foresaw that. And that's why he insisted there should be Ukraine must stand as a buffer between Europe and Russia. Now they refused. They continued. And up to now, they pushing on this situation to make sure that Ukraine becomes a member of NATO. And if Ukraine is a member of NATO, automatically you can see that Russia is threatened. Now, if they had succeeded, I'm coming to that, if they had succeeded in surrounding Russia and pushing them to submission, I think my analysis shows that they are now going to move to China, because China is the next country that is constituting a threat to the West. And then, of course, they are going to use the situation in the South China Sea, where it is highly militarized, and the claims by the surrounding countries, Philippines in particular, and Japan, of course, then they will use it to now go to China, and before you know it, China will also be brought to her knees. So you have no other superpower except the US. Now, Vladimir, I found difficult, excuse me, I find it difficult to pronounce this name.
I understand.
Vladimir Putin. Yes, Vladimir Putin has already foresaw this situation, and he vowed that rather than to say there is no Russia, let the whole world go. And he was ready to use nuclear. I think that is the deterrent that stopped the West from sending her troops to Ukraine, because will eventually trigger.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to develop the point you mentioned about China. Following your analysis, if indeed the West thought that okay, it was possible to surround Russia and bring all the countries within Russia's orbit into NATO and so on, and therefore strip Russia of the capacity to be another superpower that could stand up to it. China is a completely different. China is a completely different proposition, because it's not. First of all, it's not possible to surround China. That's number one. Two, in terms of population, even if you take the armed forces, the Chinese armed forces are the biggest in the world. And in terms of population, China has more in terms of its population than Europe and the USA combined. So it's not going to be as easy to take on China. It has the second biggest economy in the world. So it's not going to be as easy to take on China as perhaps it was or it would be to take on Russia.
Yeah. Yes, it may not be as easy as Russia, but you know, if it is not completely done, it can be weakened. China can be weakened. If it is weakened, then it will be easier to, you know, control the rest of the world. There's no more strength that will detract their wish to make the other countries in the world submissive to their wishes. You see, this world is full of multiple standards. If you have so many, if you have let's say the U.S. now has its wish to go to countries, attack the countries, and go away scot-free. Now, they think that if it is possible to do that in some smaller countries, they could still do the same thing on Russia, and then get away with it, and then, you know, go scot-free. It is not possible. But China, as you said, China will not be easy, but they have also the capacity to put a lot of trouble around China. Like you see, the Philippines have gone to the International Arbitration Court on the sea, where they were, they succeeded in getting the right over China, and the United States is supporting them. Now, the U.S. can use that as an excuse to meddle in the affairs of China. You know, the U.S., because of the continued influence or continued militarization of the South China Sea, the U.S. has also gone there to establish military installations around the place. What is it for? It is to help the other smaller countries, you know, to put problem. Now, if China is engaged with so much problems, they will not have much problem to, you know, to confront the U.S. Where they want to use their own influence and ensure hegemony on the rest of the world. You know, all these things is towards making the whole world submitting to the wishes of the West and the U.S. in particular.
Indeed.
So,
Indeed.
I doubt
Ambassador Umar, our time is completely spent, but let me thank you during this period for your time this morning and for your perspective on the program. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much for
your time. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Yeah.
Still to come after the break, United States and Japan agree to address Ukraine war-driven food and energy crisis. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte has met with Ukrainian President Zelensky in Kiev, reiterating his country is ready to support Ukraine now and in the years to come. Mr. Rutte praised the Ukrainian people for their fight against Russia and said they deserved persistent attention of the world. He said he visited various places where the Russian army had left behind a horrific trail of death and destruction, and that he was deeply shocked by what he had witnessed. President Zelensky thanked him and noted the Netherlands as among the top 10 partners of Ukraine in terms of the amount of defense support provided. Meanwhile, French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna also met with her Dutch counterpart Wopke Hoekstra in Paris to discuss the EU and Ukraine-related topics. Hoekstra started his visit at the ministry with a meeting with French Junior Europe Minister Laurence Boone. Speaking at a news conference following the meeting, he said the European Union needed to be strengthened in the face of the war in Ukraine. Europe will need to be more assertive in the defense of its interests, including the supply of oil and gas, and that's according to him. Colonna added that the European Union needed to keep providing support to Ukraine, including in the military field. China's State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi discussed cooperation with Indonesian President Joko Widodo in Jakarta and paid a visit to the ASEAN Secretariat. Ms. Wang and Mr. Widodo started off their meeting by talking about the Russia and Ukraine crisis. This was also mentioned during Mr. Wang's speech at the ASEAN Secretariat. He said the world should not be pressured to take sides and instead work towards finding a solution to resolve the conflict. They went on to discuss China and Indonesia relations, especially in terms of trade with both, saying they would like to see more Indonesian products enter the Chinese market in the coming years. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin discussed the situation in Ukraine and grain shipments over the phone. The Kremlin said that the two leaders exchanged views on, quote, coordinating efforts to ensure the safety of navigation in the Black Sea and grain exports to world markets. According to the Turkish presidency readout, Mr. Erdogan noted that, quote, it was time for the United Nations to take action for the plan regarding the formation of secure corridors via the Black Sea. The Kremlin readout added that the two leaders paid particular attention in further intensifying economic cooperation and trade and energy. The Turkish presidency readout made no mention of strengthening economic cooperation between Turkey and Russia and said that Turkey stands ready to provide all kinds of support for the revival of the negotiation process. The Turkish president also held a call with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky, saying that Turkey wants peace in Ukraine and that it is actively working on a United Nations plan to export Ukrainian grain to world markets. Any Ukrainian national may now apply for Russian citizenship under a simplified scheme. That's according to a decree signed by President Vladimir Putin yesterday. The measure also applies to stateless persons permanently living in Ukraine, as well as to citizens of the two Donbas republics recognized earlier by Russia as independent. Ukrainians may now file the relevant request without the need to live in Russia for 5 years, to have a source of income, or to pass a Russian language test, something foreigners are normally required to do before they can apply for Russian citizenship. The presidential decree modifies the procedures earlier reserved for the citizens of the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, as well as the residents of the two southern Ukrainian regions that have been under the control of the Russian forces almost since the start of the conflict between Moscow and Kiev. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry has reacted to Russia's citizenship initiative, saying that granting all Ukrainians a right to apply for Russian citizenship under a simplified procedure is nothing short of, quote, an encroachment on the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The ministry said it strongly condemns the move. On the same day, Russian President Vladimir Putin signed the relevant decree. Ukrainian diplomats also declared Moscow's decision incompatible with the norms and principles of international law. According to the ministry's statement, the offer to Ukrainians of a fast track to Russian citizenship suggests the Kremlin is still seeking to seek Ukrainian lands, destroy the Ukrainian state, and forcibly assimilate the Ukrainian nation. Kiev also warned that it would consider the granting of Russian citizenship to Ukrainians under this procedure null and void, adding that it would have no legal consequences for Ukraine. It also accused Moscow of attempts of using the procedure to force Ukrainians living in territories controlled by Russian troops to participate in the criminal activities of occupation administrations. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba also branded the Russian president's decree worthless, adding that it only shows Putin's aggressive appetites. Let's talk now to Andrzej Matisak, deputy head of the foreign desk of Pravda newspaper. He joins us virtually from Bratislava in Slovakia. Good morning to you, Andrew. Thank you for your time. Good morning from Bratislava. Thanks for having me. Let's start off with what I just read, this offer of citizenship to all Ukrainians, a fast-track citizenship to all Ukrainians by the Russians. Do you think this is going to have any real impact on the situation, both on the ground and in terms of either humanitarian or refugee status of those who have had to flee the fighting? I really don't think so. I think that what Kiev said, that this is basically another attempt of Vladimir Putin trying to stir up the tensions. I think this is basically the correct reading of the situation. This is really something which is hard. I cannot fathom how this could work in practice. It might work on some occupied territories by Russians. They might try to convince some people to sign up for the citizenship. We see some collaborators on those occupied territories, so they might try to expand somehow the net of the collaborators, I mean Russians. Otherwise, I think this is another attempt how to try to get over Ukraine in a way, you know, by military, by other means. This is simply something which I cannot think how this could really work. Let's come to where you are in Slovakia. What is the situation there in terms of what people make of the war in Ukraine? Are they generally supportive of Ukraine? Are they looking at this as just another problem that they don't want to have? Slovakians want to focus on their own daily lives and tackle their own challenges in country without having this external currents disturbing them. Ukraine is our neighboring country, and Slovakia is the member of NATO, member of EU, and Slovakian government is doing as much as possible to help Ukraine by military means, by giving shelter to refugees, and so on. The public is somehow divided. There is a quite deep pro-Russian sentiment in my country. If you look at the polls, for example, there was a YouGov poll in end of May, beginning of June, that said that 38% of Slovaks think that the NATO and the West is to blame for the war. But in general, people are quite supportive, especially of Ukrainians who are coming in. We have been sheltering over 700,000 of Ukrainians in Slovakia. So this is really people are trying to help as much as possible. And as I said, the government is quite supportive of the military efforts of Ukraine. We have sent, as one of the first countries, Slovakia sent the heavy weapons, for example, anti-aircraft system S-300, and there are other. We have sent some helicopters. There are discussions about sending tanks, maybe sending some old Russian mix. So we will see. But of course, people are feeling that there is war going on, and as the war will move forward, it seems this is going to be a prolonged conflict. This will be also a political challenge for any European government, how to keep the support of Ukraine, because Ukraine definitely needs the Western support to withstand the attacks from Russia. This is the
horrible invasion, absolutely unprovoked. And to be honest, I hardly can agree with your previous guest. This is the Putin's war. Vladimir Putin decided to have it, and this is basically a neo-imperialist war. So this is how I see it.
Now, I'm happy you made reference to my previous guest. His position is based on the fact that this war was provoked by the West's attempt to encircle Russia using Ukraine as a pawn in the process. Obviously, you disagree with that, but then he went on to talk about the fact that if the West succeeds in taming, and I use that word in inverted commas, Russia, then they're going to move on to China. So I asked the question, is China at the same prospect level with Russia? What did you make of that position?
It's hard to imagine that. Of course, we have our disagreements with China. There was a NATO summit at the end of June in Madrid. China, in a new NATO document, the new strategic concept, is basically described as a challenge, as a military challenge, political challenge, economical challenge. But as NATO's Secretary General, Mr. Stoltenberg, also said, China is not our adversary. I had a chance to also interview the Slovak Foreign Minister, Mr. Korčok, in Madrid, and he said, okay, China is a rival, but also a partner. So I think that our relationship with China, and I mean the West and the EU and the US, is kind of more complicated than like saying that China is an enemy or an adversary. And of course, as you pointed out in the previous segment, I really cannot imagine how the West can surround China. And in fact, it was also not the case of Russia. So we're definitely in the period of heightening tensions between big powers. But I think that the main guilt, that the problem is definitely that Russia started the war against Ukraine. This is the war that has nothing to do, or has so little to do. This is mostly an excuse. Ukraine getting into NATO, this is mostly an excuse. Now even Mr. Putin is talking about they want to be like Peter the Great and strengthen Russia, to conquer the historical lands of Russia. And I think we can spend probably hours on this program to talk about what is the historical land of Russia. Everything from Vladivostok to where? To my country, for example. I think this is, as I said, this is mostly a neo-imperialist war. And of course, we can blame the West for many issues, many things that West did wrong in the past decades. That's not up to the debate. This is real. But sometimes also to say, okay, in this moment, Russia is to blame.
In that case, let's come back to some of the consequences here. One of the biggest leverages Russia has over many European countries is this question of energy supply, gas in particular. And I've had a guest who told me that if this war does not end by October, that the European countries who have energy deals with Russia could be in real trouble because that is likely to be a situation where they're going to really need gas supplies. Now, what is the situation in Slovakia? Have you witnessed higher energy prices, for example? Are there any threats of Russia in any way? And are we feeling the impact economically of what is going on between Russia and Ukraine?
As in many countries, also Slovakia is facing the high energy prices, high inflation, which is partly, of course, related to the war, but it started even before the war. Is the higher demand in the market after the war? Let's say after. I am not sure if it is after, but with somehow the pandemic, people are trying to say it's over. It might be not, but it's a different topic. But as I said, the energy prices are going up. inflation is going up. But on the other hand, while the prediction of the guest you had might be right, I am a little bit more optimistic about the upcoming scenarios. EU is trying to do as much as possible to somehow mitigate the problems. There was a decision that the EU countries has to have their gas storages full in over 80%. So those storages are filling it up. So now, of course, Russia stopped the Nord Stream 1 pipeline because of the maintenance that was planned. But there are concerns that Russia might stop it permanently or semi-permanently. So we are trying to deal with the scenario when there will be no gas coming from Russia, no oil coming from Russia, and for example, also no nuclear fuel from Russia, because, for example, Slovakia is quite dependent, not quite 100% dependent on nuclear fuel from Russia. We have enough fuel now for some time, the nuclear fuel for some time, but it might be a problem for the future. But it also must be said that the EU is really trying to find a way how to deal with the situation, also via solidarity clauses. Like if some country has some more resources, we can manage to help to the other country. So while this is a problem, at this moment, I would say we are doing all the correct steps how to stop it, make it even bigger one. And of course, it also very much depends on the evolution of the war, on the thinking in Kremlin. But I think that in a way, what's going on is it might sound counterintuitive, but I think in a way it's good for Europe. I think that even in 2009, when we have a first energy crisis with Russia, then 2014 with their occupying of Crimea and starting the war on the east of Ukraine, Russia was using the energy as a tool for blackmailing for years. Russia was for many countries quite a reliable partner, but for other countries, as I said, Russia was just using energy as a blackmail. So I think that this is the time how to get rid of Russian dependency as fast as possible, and also how to transit to the net zero economy as fast as possible. And I think that this would be a huge blow for Russia.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Andrea, for your time this morning. It's been a pleasure. Andrea Matisakis, Deputy Head of Foreign Desk at Pravda newspaper in Bratislava, Slovakia. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Still to come, Russian artillery captured by Ukraine goes on display in Prague. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Germany's cabinet is set to decide steps to reactivate coal-fired power plants in order to reduce gas consumption. Had coal-fired power plants that were supposed to be shut down this year and in 2023 will participate in the electricity market for a limited period as long as Germany is in phase 2 alarm stage of its 3-phase emergency gas plan. The regulations, which will come into force once approved by the cabinet this week, aim to reduce gas consumption so filling of storage facilities continue in spite of lower facilities. According to rough estimates, the move should cover around 1% of Germany's gas consumption. The government has asked electricity operators in the south of Germany, such as EnBW and Uniper, to keep coal-fired power plants ready for operation in case of a gas emergency. Let's talk to Ini John McQuarrie of our business desk, as always. Ini,
good morning.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
1% of gas consumption, many people looking at that figure would say not much of a difference. And you did reference that yesterday when we were talking about this, that some of these numbers look small individually, but that, you know, at some point they do add up and they could be ramped up.
Yes, they could be ramped up because they're meeting tomorrow actually for this. And, you know, before we go into that, I think the first thing to note here is this is a coal-fired plant. And so the issue of climate change and the environment which the world was pursuing seems to be...
And which Germany was one of the leading countries in Europe.
It's being dumped at this time, I think, for survival. I guess that's the first thing to say. And also, well, on the other hand, they've also signed an MOU with Czech Republic to get some other ways to finance this and find a way to leave fossil fuel. But I mean, the reality of it is that basically it's fossil fuel and the worst kind at this time that is going to be relied upon.
Yeah, because coal is one of the dirtiest.
It is the dirtiest at this time. And by October, if this continues, they're moving to another stage which will even embolden even more use of coal. So
yeah, because I think that would be at somewhere at the start of winter.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are, of course, talking about that.
Yeah, already people are preparing, which is also part of what they're preparing to try to save gas, which is a bit clean and things like that. But back to what you said about it being just 1%. It is just 1%, and it doesn't sound like much. But I guess, I mean, in the face of almost no alternative or no better alternative, this is one thing that they can do to try to at least not cut. You remember when they started the first stage, asking people to cut down on their use, voluntary, albeit at this time, but if care is not taken, then power and gas may only be channeled to very necessary use, you know, just for warmth, and then for manufacturers and warmth at home, and some other uses might be cut down, which of course is already driving energy cost up, already driving cost of production up. We've talked about how some people are going back to China, you know, to get products and stuff like that. So 1% small, but well, let's do
ramped up. Well, let's wait and see. Of course, as time goes on, if this conflict is not resolved, more and more people, not just Germany, more and more people are going to look at Germany as a good example of how to go about it and follow
South Africa is already following through. They've been talking a whole lot about cutting down on coal and all that. But I mean, when we look at, I can't remember the huge amount that they need for it now, and the reality that is stark naked on your face. I mean, I
mean, you go back and you take a look at it, and you're like, yeah, maybe later.
Maybe later. Yes. Not right now. Let's deal with the necessities now.
Now, the president of Turkey and his Russian counterpart, as we've reported, discussed the establishment of safe corridors for grain exports in Black Sea. Now, this discussion between the presidents is news, but these discussions have been going on for weeks and months.
It's been going on, I think, since last month, June. Maybe they're taking it more serious now because the United Nations is now involved, but there are also dangers because Ukraine has expressed some skepticism about this because of the mines on the Black Sea. So, fine, Russia had released the Snake Island, which is part of the Black Sea, where they could, you know, but they have a lot of mines, number one. Number two, the farmers have been disrupted. Where are the grains now? You know, but in this case now, the UN is involved, and Turkey is supposed to be like a neutral ground. So the UN is supposed to have a representative, and then Turkey, Ukraine, and Russia. I think they're supposed to meet in Turkey to have a discussion. And well, for the sake of the world, we do hope, because according to the Food and Agriculture Organization, about 20 million tons of grain that's supposed to be exported to the world is stuck somewhere or destroyed, or, you know, Ukrainians will say stolen by Russian, you know. So if they can come up with an agreeable arrangement by all parties, then we can have the Black Sea port open and the mines removed, and then there can be some export of grains, and perhaps it could help food prices. Although we've seen records that the global food prices have tapered now, I think, for the second month, but where is it actually?
Where is it? Very good question. Where is it? And speaking of where it is, quite a number of people in Russia are missing French fries. And for those who have had the pleasure of visiting McDonald's, your burger is incomplete without the fries. But you did talk about this when we talked about the opening of the stores that replaced McDonald's.
Yes, I think they call it in Russia, but interpreted in English, tasty, that's it.
That's it,
yeah. But we don't know about the tastiness now.
And now it's missing the fries.
It's missing the fries. Prices have gone up about 10%, and there are even complaints of spoiled sources, you know, because obviously the demand is not as much as it used to be. So even though they produce so much, things get bad because they are kept till the next day and all that. The taste is not really the same, and there are some talks of beer being served there, even though they denied that, but they didn't deny the fact that there's spoiled food that have been served. There are no fries, and well, the Minister of Agriculture in Russia
has denied. I think I saw that somewhere.
Yes, and he's saying that the harvest season for potatoes is coming, so they're going to have a lot of fries. They should just hold on. But the truth is, off season for potato, normally they will import, but with the supply chains and supply chain disruption and the sanctions, they've not been able to do that. So that's what's going on at this time. So maybe harvest season, fries will be back.
Yeah, well, I don't know how many of those people will be prepared to wait till then. But let's take a look at the markets. First, global markets. I know that last week, Ladi and I continued to discuss every day the fact that the investors are still quite skittish about all of this. But what's it looking like now? I know in Nigeria it's been a long holiday, so the markets are closed. But globally, the markets are not closed. So what's it looking like?
Well, I think investors are kind of getting used to it, but they are not plunging out there yet because there's still a whole lot of uncertainty in the atmosphere. So they're still watching and waiting. U.S. jobs figures came out last week. I think it was Friday, and it came out better than expected, boosting a little bit of confidence and all that, even though President Joe Biden has warned that the next one might be good, but not that good.
I saw that.
So, well, maybe we're getting used, and that's part of the reason why we talk about the global food prices tapering. Maybe the world is getting used to the variables the way it is now, but no investor is really ready to go out there and plunge into the market and just say, oh, okay, now this is time for me to plunge out there, even though you're supposed to buy the dip, but because we don't know how
deep is going to go
down, so you don't know if the next dip is going to take your money down there or if it's going to be a little bit of recovery. So people are still skeptical, and it's neither here nor more red, but
occasional flashes of green.
Exactly.
More of this, of course. Ini will be here along with Ladi after this program on Business Morning, and then on Business Incorporated later on in the course of the day to unpack all of this. But for now, Ine, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Let's take a look at some of the sports out of this. Ukraine will launch its new football season in spite of Russia's ongoing invasion. Its sports minister, Vadim Gutsait, said the country's football championships will start on August the 23rd. Ukrainian football clubs decided in April to end the previous season early after it was suspended following Russia's invasion. The minister said that the matches of the new season will be held in the territory of Ukraine, but without spectators and with mandatory observance of all safety rules. And Carolina Hurricanes have used 4 of their 7 draft picks to select Russian players at the National Hockey League draft in Montreal in spite of tensions between Russia, the United States, and Canada. The franchise used the 60th pick, their first of the draft, to choose forwards Oleg Trikosov in the second round at Bell Center. The following round saw the Hurricanes pick up Alexander Perevalov. They also picked up Vladimir Grudinin and Alexander Pelevin in the following rounds. And finally, on the program, people in Prague gathered to see Russian tanks, missiles, and a self-propelled mortar system that were captured by Ukrainian forces after they went on display in the Czech capital. According to information compiled by the Ukrainian Interior Ministry, which organized the exhibition, among the items on display was a T-90A battle tank, which had been destroyed by the Ukrainian army during an attempted attack on the Chernihiv region. Ilya Kuzinski, a volunteer from Kiev, said the purpose of the exhibition was to, quote, show to Europe that the war is closer than they think. Among the onlookers was President Zhiri Plochek, who picked up his son and lifted him up to let him see the insides of the destroyed Russian military systems. Rescue workers pulled more bodies and some survivors from an apartment building destroyed by a missile strike that killed 24 people in eastern Ukraine, while the bombardment killed at least 3 in the second largest city, and that's just out of Kharkiv.
All these tanks is the shooted Russian tanks from the Kiev district and Kiev region, and we bring it here to show the Europe that war is closer than they think.
And war is indeed closer than most in Europe think. It's on that note that we end our program this morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ladi Akiri Dundwale. There's an update at 5 o'clock within the world today. And then the show is back tomorrow. It's the last day of Salah. Do enjoy it. Good morning.